the purpose in the pre-design is looking at those sites, looking at your procurement methods, your design and your programs. The goal is to make that necessary foundation so that you know which direction you'd like to go, how you would like to roughly get there, and what sort of assets you have, be it capital, be it land, and what sort of constraints you have. Again, be it capital or land or time. Time seems to be a fairly significant one for community organizations that's not as present in the private sector because, of course, you know, you're basically paying, you're on the job, so to speak. It's very easy to make decisions when there isn't a huge amount of investment and your past decisions don't have to be vetted. So changing a floor plan is very easy when you don't also have sub-consultants, engineers, structural engineers, mechanical engineers, who also have to now rearrange an entire sprinkler system, alarm system, their, you know, ducting, their, you know, all that sort of things, sort of stuff. So looking at those pre-designed services, this is, you know, what can be included in the list. So from the pre-design to the schematic design, the pre-design is that understanding the document and documenting the needs and the functions of the building, or basically if your property is suitable. So if it's a corridor designation, if it's a high value designation, you may recall, it may not be the proper location for cluster housing or for, you know, like a small individual home. Nor would it be maybe appropriate or possible to have a tower built on a, you know, an ER zoned space, or even an HR, so a higher order residential zoning. So the schematic design, however, which these wonderful stock photos show what people think this process is like. Everyone's laying out papers and doing stuff. You'll understanding and document the configuration, the form, the siting of the building. So we tried to go into this and get more of an understanding of how this fits on the site. And I have a few kind of models that we'll be able to show later about how this actually works. Yeah, everyone thinks that you're just pointing at stuff and writing Post-it notes. Everyone seems to love Post-it notes, but you will be doing some other things within the schematic design phase as and if you move forward with these projects. That's because the goal is really to, you know, understand from what you were going to build, or what you thought maybe you wanted to build, to what will be built. And then later on in design development, which is the phase after that, is basically the how. So right now, what would typically happen is you as community organizations would reach out to an architect or design team that can assist in the architectural expression of some of these projects, which may include actually getting a team together both through your organization, but also through some of those sub-consultants, maybe engineers, maybe getting a planner on your side, and maybe having a dedicated like a design leadership team within your organization, or a committee within your organization. The purpose of this phase would be to understand some of those physical features in a little bit more detail, in terms of how the design thus far fits into the neighborhood, what sort of space and planning requirements are going to be required in the functional program. So, for example, if I could use Lindsay, YWCA, we kind of jumped headfirst into this because we wanted to know how big a potential childcare space would be. So Lindsay, because she just had it on hand, I guess, sent through the required square feet required per kid in a childcare facility of outdoor space, of uninterrupted indoor space, of your amenities, your bathrooms, your wet space, your wet stations, those elements. which we could then feed into the shape that we had and get a little bit more resolution. But the thing is, you'll be doing that in terms of, a typical office. You won't just say these are offices. You'll say, well, here are the offices, and this is a little bit of an entryway. In terms of the childcare space, it could be, well, here's the main open play space. Here are some amenities, and maybe here's a little bit of mechanical that would fit in there as well. The other element is that as you move into schematic design, you're not really talking about just the, why build. You're really trying to get a sense of the narrative, the story, and the way in which you're going to explain passionately, because we're all passionate about these projects, why this is great, why it works, why it's important, not just to you, but to the people who are going to be using it and to the community as a whole. Those sorts of narratives and storytelling, we're going to get a little bit more into in the phase 3 as we start to talk more about sharing these projects and the direction with others, either in your organization or outside of your organization. That's discussion for later. But that creating a graphic and even verbal story is an important element of that schematic design, because it's that story that you're going to try and protect moving into the how you build it. If you want something that's very open and responds to the community, has an open street face, or feels welcoming because you're a welcoming facility, that's going to inform the how to be built, because you're likely not going to build it out of concrete with a solid concrete wall in the front. There are those sorts of elements that once they're defined in schematic design, they become an important elements as you move into the hows. There's very efficient ways to build things. And sometimes those efficient ways are exactly what you would want in your basically narrative. But sometimes efficient design is not necessarily in the best interest of the community, of your tenants, of your staff, of your parish. And those are the things that you do want to make sure that you protect. So, other things, as I briefly mentioned, the design team may be included at this point. You may hire on a project manager or a construction manager for different types of project procurement. And those individuals may say, oh, for this type of program, you really need, or this type of project, you really need a landscape architect, or you really need a civil architect, civil engineer. Maybe this type of project, you're going to need a structural engineer, but depending on your water lines, your gas lines, your power lines, maybe there are implications of the architectural design that you can't necessarily do what you were thinking in the pre-design, because maybe there's a big gas line that runs underneath it. Maybe there's only so much connection from the site to the street and that sanitary line or the water main. Those are the sorts of things that you start to parse through in schematic design. And you either say, well, that's a constraint that I'm not going to be able to overcome, or you say, well, let's say the site's too high, or the main street, the water line is too high. You say, well, it's not like we're going to do a fill or put the project higher up. We'll just get a pump. Those are the sorts of conclusions that you come to, problems that you run into, and solutions that you find with your consultant teams. And then you just review, and you review, and you review, and you review. And there's a lot of pointing at papers, right? As I showed, there are images. That's what that part is like. There is a lot of reviewing fairly in-depth information that also has to do with how you feel about your project. You as a spokesperson, or even a navigator yourself for your own organization. I should say steward, as a steward for your organization. So the RAIC materials, again, these are fairly in-depth, but the thing is that if I've just said a bunch of words and I had some slides up, that's great. There is a ton more information within those chapters. Chapter 6.2 is the schematic design chapter. 6.1 is the pre-design. And when you look through those, they'll give you a very quick understanding of, hey, maybe where should we be? So that if you consult with somebody, or a design team comes forward and they say, hey, well, we can provide this, 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 and this. You'd be able to reply, hey, well, as I understand, in pre-design, you may be able to help us with some of those preliminary costings or business feasibility or market feasibility. And maybe I don't need so much getting an engineer involved at the pre-design stage. Those are basically, it's just context. So this resource is open for everyone, and hopefully gives a bit of information.